Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. I once received an email from a reader who asked me, is there any way to deliver a warning message that the new conquest will actually hear? Many Lovefraud readers have asked about warning the sociopath's next victim, and that's what we'll talk about in this episode of Lovefraud Live. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'm going to explain 3 reasons why it's hard for people to hear warnings about sociopaths, and 3 possible reactions when people do receive warnings. Of course, this is a live streaming show, and I'll answer your questions at the end of this presentation, so please send them to me as we go along. Okay, so let's get started. The reader who asked the question had been married to a sociopath for 25 years, and as you can imagine, it was a nightmare. When her ex moved in with the new woman, she knew that the target was hooked and that her ex would soon begin behaving badly. Sure enough, every time she saw the happy couple somewhere, the woman looked more and more haggard and even physically ill. Finally, when the guy went out of the country, she escaped. Our reader reached out to the recently escaped victim through a mutual contact and asked if she was okay. The woman said her heart was hurting because the guy had cheated on her, but she was considering reconciliation. Well, our reader told her that it usually takes 7 tries for a woman to leave an abuser. And she said that when something doesn't feel right, there's a reason for it. She advised the woman to always trust her gut. And finally, she said, "Please know that you are not crazy." Well, it was the crazy part that clicked for the new victim, and the floodgates opened. The guy had convinced her that she was the crazy one, that she had mental problems. So once the new victim understood that he was gaslighting her, she dumped the guy for good and became friends with his ex-wife, our Lovefraud reader. Our reader apologized profusely for not warning her sooner, but the two of them discussed it and came to the conclusion that even if she had tried, the new victim wouldn't have believed her. So our reader asked me 2 questions. First, is there any way to successfully deliver a warning message to women in these situations that they will actually hear? Or do they have to figure it out on their own? And second, how do we get this message to young women or even young girls to watch out for sociopathic behavior before they get caught in the trap? Okay, so let's discuss these questions. About the first one, is there any chance of the sociopath's latest conquest hearing a warning about things to come? The short answer is maybe. It depends on the individual and the circumstances. If the ex's next target said that she wouldn't have listened to our Lovefraud reader, then I'm sure that's the case. Here are 3 reasons why it is so difficult for people to hear warnings about sociopaths. Reason number 1, society's almost total lack of awareness about these personality disorders. Most people do not understand what a sociopath or a psychopath is. Even worse, those who think they know what a sociopath or a psychopath is are often wrong. People who have an awareness of personality disorders may believe that sociopaths and psychopaths are all criminals or serial killers. After all, that's what we see on TV and in the movies. So if you try to tell someone that his or her new love interest is a sociopath, and that person hasn't already done time in jail or murdered anyone, you sound like nothing more than a spiteful ex. And even if you try to avoid this pitfall by not referring to the term sociopath or psychopath, you face another problem. Our society doesn't have an awareness that evil exists. Most of us don't know that people can appear to be loving, caring human beings, but it's all an act designed to get past our defenses so that we can be exploited. People who are unaware that human predators live among us will have difficulty believing that their new partner, who appears to be so loving and so wonderful, is actually dangerous. Number 2, the sociopath has primed the next target not to believe you. Do you remember how your ex described his or her romantic partners before you? Most likely, the description was pretty negative. That person was abusive or overbearing or cold-hearted or demanding, unstable, mentally ill, delusional, etc., etc., etc. Well, now that is how your ex is describing you. So when sociopaths trash their previous romantic partners, they are really, really convincing. They are convincing that everything was your fault. The sociopath did the best he or she could, but there was no pleasing you. You are a gold digger, a cheater, or some other type of nasty person. The new partner is appalled at how badly you supposedly treated the sociopath. The new partner already dislikes you, perhaps even hates you, even though you've never met. So, is this person going to listen to a message from you? It's not likely. Okay, so here's reason number 3. In the beginning, the new partner is being love-bombed. So whether the relationship is new or they've been together for a while, if the sociopath hasn't yet sealed the deal and convinced the target to commit, well, the seduction may still be going on. That means the sociopath is still love-bombing this person, showering the target with attention and affection. And who doesn't like being put on a pedestal? If someone is saying, "I love you," who doesn't want to believe it? So, while the sociopath is promising a lifetime of happily ever after, is the new target going to want to give up the dream and believe you? Probably not. Now, if it's a little later in the involvement, and the new target has already begun to experience the dark side of the sociopath, well, then he or she may be more willing to listen. So, what should you do? Should you try to warn the next victim? In my personal opinion, if you can warn safely, you should at least try. The key here is if you can warn safely. Your first responsibility is to yourself. You need to protect your finances, your livelihood, your court case, your children, and your recovery. If your situation will be jeopardized in any way by saying something to the new target, don't do it. But suppose you figure out that you're pretty safe and you decide to take the step to warn the new target. Then, one of 3 things will happen. 1, the target will believe you and get out. 2, the target will not believe you and stay. 3, the target won't believe you right away, but will remember your warning later and possibly get out. You need to be able to accept whatever happens. If you're able to help the target escape, terrific. If the person doesn't heed your warning, you need to be satisfied with the fact that at least you tried. Maybe you'll hear at some later time that the person escaped, and maybe your warning will have been partly responsible. But you can't wait for that. You need to move on with your life. Now, why do I even suggest warning the new target? Many people, including many Lovefraud readers, say that no one should try to warn the new target. They say the person will not listen, and you'll be wasting your time and your emotional energy. Maybe, and maybe not. Here's why I think it's important to at least try if you're inclined. Not only could you possibly help the new target, but you will address the first problem that I mentioned, society's lack of awareness about sociopaths. As a culture, we don't talk about sociopaths. We don't talk about what they are and how they exploit us. This lack of discussion, this black hole of ignorance, is what enables sociopaths to keep finding new victims. The fact that predators live among us is the biggest skeleton in the closet of the human race. Well, in my opinion, it's time to open the door and let the light shine on the skeleton and the sociopaths. Finally, our Lovefraud reader asked, how do we start to get this message to young women or even young girls to watch out for sociopathic behavior before they get caught in the trap? The answer is what I just said. We need to start talking about the problem. My recommendation to all my Lovefraud viewers and readers is that you educate yourselves about sociopaths. Yes, you've already learned, probably the hard way, that they exist. And that's actually an important first step. But I suggest that you really research the topic, learn the traits, and learn the warning signs. I encourage everyone to understand the disorder enough so that you can talk about it in a calm, informed way. And then, when an opportunity arises, go ahead and talk about it to young women, or for that matter, to young men, in an age-appropriate manner. And that's how we warn people, one conversation at a time. Okay, so let me take a look, see what kind of questions we may have today. Okay, so Luis says, what if you send a message anonymously? At least something, and greetings from Mexico City. Hola, muchas gracias. Yes, that's a possibility. I have heard of people who have done that, sending some kind of a warning anonymously. I've heard of people who have, actually on a few occasions, people have signed folks up for love fraud. I'm not sure if I would recommend that because it's probably not a real good idea, but it's been done. It's a possibility. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I have certainly heard of people doing that. You probably won't know if your message had any impact, but it's a possibility. It's something that you could try to do. Okay. Love Peace says this really needs to be taught in schools, and yes, that's actually very true, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. People I've talked to have told me about their experiences, and then they say, why don't they talk about this in high school? It should definitely be done. In fact, I have done some presentations in some high schools, and it was actually kind of amazing because the kids are very interested. They were listening, and invariably, after any of these presentations, kids came up to me, and sometimes teachers came up to me to talk about their own experiences. I mean, already in high school, this is already happening to them. They're ending up in these relationships. And it's important for people at a young age to know this, because usually if somebody is disordered, that's when it really starts to come out, is in high school. I mean, there's a relationship between the changes people go through in puberty and this disorder developing. So I don't know the percentage, but I would say most people who exhibit the traits of antisocial or psychopathic personality disorder start showing those behaviors while they're in high school. HM asks, I wonder if we warn the new target and they leave the sociopath, but what if they are hoovered again? Would this be triggering for us? Possibly. And again, that's why you need to be comfortable with the idea that things may not go well. I mean, I have certainly heard of situations where that's happened, where the person was warned, they left, and then they went back to the person, and you can't take it in. I mean, and then if that happens, for sure, you probably need to cut any contact with this person. In fact, sometimes you need to do that anyway. I mean, in my particular case, I did make contact with other people who were victimized by my sociopathic ex. And for me, it was affirming. It was helpful. We worked together to try and figure out what in the world was going on. And I'm still friendly, with the people that I spoke to then. But that's not always the case. And so I've also heard of plenty of people who have warned someone and then the person just became too much. I mean, they're calling all the time and asking questions and all this other stuff. And people had to set boundaries and just stop being involved. Always keep in mind that your own recovery, your own life is first. And you need to put yourself first. If you think you're going to be triggered, then that's not warning safely. You have to put yourself first. And if you do, and I mean, if you are putting yourself first, if you're comfortable with making a warning, that could be helpful too. I've spoken to plenty of people who were just, their conscience would bother them if they didn't at least try and tell the person what was going on. So, I mean, it's a very personal decision. You need to do what's best for you. Again, some people say, don't even try, you're wasting your time, you don't even bother. And, but I have heard from people who were warned and were grateful. I've heard from people who were angry that their friends or other people who knew this person did not warn them. They said, why didn't anybody tell me what was going on? So, there's a lot of aspects to this, and essentially what it boils down to is that you need to do what's best for you, first and foremost, and then if you're able to help someone else, that's just extra. It's a cherry on top of the ice cream. Oh dear. Deborah says, my spath took me to his therapist who tried to convince me to stay with him. Dangerous and clueless. Yeah, that happens a fair amount. In fact, about half the time. Our research for love fraud shows that approximately half of therapists have absolutely no idea what goes on in these relationships. They don't understand personality disorders. They don't understand what happens when people are in these abusive relationships. So that's why if you are seeing a therapist or in a situation like this, if you're in contact with a therapist and what this person just what this person is saying just doesn't sit right with you, or you get the feeling that he or she doesn't understand what you're talking about, move on. I mean, trust your instincts, trust yourself. I know that can be hard because one of the things that sociopaths do is tear us down to the point where we feel like it's hard to trust ourselves. But if you allow yourself to really listen to your own insides, to the messages your body is sending you. I mean, if you're going around with anxiety and sleeplessness and just worry about what's going on, then these are all pretty strong warning signs. So you need to trust yourself despite what someone like a therapist may say to you. Okay. All right, so story time with Vinny. That's a cute name. How could you do it anonymously? Dangerous to be found out. Well, there's always snail mail, I mean, if you know where the person lives or has an address, you could set up a fake Facebook account and send a message if you can do that. Of course, the message, if you're not a friend, because it could be dangerous to try and be a friend, the messages will go to that other folder, and maybe the person will find it at some point. I mean, there's a few things that you could do. But again, always put yourself first. And if you feel that you can do it safely, fine. If not, don't do it. And the other thing to consider is that you don't have to do it right away. I mean, maybe right now is not a good time for you to do it, but maybe after you have some distance, a couple months, even a year or so down the road, if you're feeling stronger and this person is still with the sociopath, by then it's probably getting bad. I mean, you could always do it at another time. If you make a decision not to do it now, some other time you could change your mind. So, there's no pressure here. It's you have to do what's best for you. Okay. Okay. Well, that appears to be pretty much the end of the questions for tonight. So I thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. And we'll see you next Tuesday at 8 o'clock for the next episode of Lovefraud Live. Thanks a lot. See you later.